I woke up in complete panic, my chest tight, my breath shallow, convinced that someone in the room was dying. The metal walls around me were vibrating violently as the ship docked. The anchor slammed into the ocean floor with a deafening crash. And layered on top of all of it was a sound so disturbing, so unnatural, that my brain couldn't process it fast enough. It wasn't just loud. It was choking, gasping, broken, like air was being ripped through a collapsing throat. In that moment, half asleep and terrified, I honestly thought I was listening to someone take their last breaths. But the real horror came seconds later, when I realized she was completely fine, sleeping peacefully, while I was wide awake, shaking, and already exhausted beyond words. Asterisk if you've ever had your peace destroyed by someone who dismissed your suffering like it meant nothing, this story is for you. Before we continue, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel for more real and emotionally charged Reddit revenge stories, and comment below telling me where you're watching this video from. I want to know how many people around the world have dealt with something like this, because trust me, by the end, you're going to feel justified. I work and live on a cruise ship, and unless you've experienced that life firsthand, it's hard to explain how intense it really is. People imagine cruise ships as floating vacations, endless buffets, calm ocean views, and relaxed days. What they don't see is the reality for crew members. This ship is my job, my home, my bedroom, my break room, and my only escape, all packed into a constantly moving metal structure that never truly rests. There is no real silence. There is no true stillness. Even when everything seems calm, the ship hums beneath you like a living creature that never sleeps. Depending on the route, we dock every 2 to 4 days, and docking is never gentle. The anchors don't softly lower into the water, they slam down with a force that rattles the entire ship. The engines roar, metal groans, and vibrations travel through the walls, the floor, the bed, and straight into your bones. Your body learns to live with it, but sleep is always fragile. It's something you fight for, not something you're guaranteed. Now imagine trying to survive that environment while sharing a tiny cabin with someone who snores louder than all of it combined. I'm a performer on board, which means we're allowed to choose our roommates. That system exists for a reason. Our schedules are brutal, our workdays are long, and our jobs demand energy, focus, and emotional control. Once roommates are assigned, changing rooms is almost impossible unless something truly extreme happens. Medical emergencies, physical altercations, safety threats. Apparently, slowly losing your mind from sleep deprivation doesn't qualify. Our cabin was small even by ship standards, 2 bunk beds bolted into cold metal walls. Barely enough space to stand without brushing against something hard and unforgiving. I slept on the top bunk, which meant every sound traveled upward, magnified, unavoidable. Every vibration ran straight through the frame and into my body. She slept on the bottom bunk, closer to the floor, completely shielded from how loud and invasive her presence became above her. At first, there were no red flags. We weren't friends, but we were polite, professional, respectful. We shared the space without tension. She never once mentioned that she snored, not as a warning, not as a joke, not even casually. And looking back, that silence feels intentional. Like information she chose not to share because it might inconvenience her. The first night it happened, my body reacted before my brain could catch up. The sound ripped me out of sleep so violently that I sat straight up in my bunk, heart pounding, adrenaline flooding my system. It wasn't normal snoring. It was wet, broken, aggressive. Like someone choking on air that refused to reach their lungs. I grabbed the rail of my bunk and leaned over, squinting through the dim cabin light, trying to see her face. The noise would stop suddenly, just long enough for panic to spike, and then explode again even louder, gasping, rattling, choking. Each breath sounded like a struggle for survival. My instincts screamed at me to act, to jump down, to shake her awake, to call medical. I was already imagining alarms, emergency lights, explaining to someone that I'd heard something terribly wrong. Then I noticed her chest, rising, falling, slow, steady. Her body was relaxed. Her face was calm. She wasn't waking up. She wasn't Struggling, she was deeply asleep. That realization didn't calm me. It terrified me in a different way, because if this wasn't an emergency, then this was normal for her. And if this was normal, then this wasn't going to stop. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling inches from my face, trying to slow my breathing. I told myself it was a one-time thing. Everyone snores occasionally. Maybe she was overtired. Maybe. The ship's movement made it worse. Maybe tomorrow night would be better. I needed to believe that, because the alternative was unthinkable. Tomorrow night was worse. The second night, the sound started almost immediately after she fell asleep. Louder, deeper, more aggressive. It filled the cabin, bounced off the walls, crawled into my ears no matter how I positioned myself. I turned onto my side, then my other side, then my back. Nothing helped. Every choking gasp made my stomach tighten, part of my brain still reacting like I was listening to someone suffocate. By the third night, desperation set in. I shoved earplugs as deep as I safely could. I put on my big over-the-ear headphones, the kind designed to block out engine noise. I played music, loud, so loud it would normally drown out everything. I could still hear her. I could hear her snoring over the engines, over the metal screaming as the ship docked, over the anchor slamming into the ocean floor. It wasn't just loud, it was invasive. It forced its way into my head, into my thoughts, into my nerves, and every choking sound reignited that same spike of fear. Night after night, days started blending together. My eyes burned constantly. My head felt heavy and foggy. My reactions slowed. Simple tasks took more effort than they should have. I found myself rereading the same lines, forgetting small things, snapping internally over nothing. Sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it changes you. Eventually. I did the responsible thing. I talked to her. I chose my words carefully. I didn't accuse her. I didn't raise my voice. I explained that I wasn't sleeping, that the snoring was extreme, that the choking sounds were genuinely alarming, that I was exhausted, mentally and physically, that maybe we could work together to find a solution. She barely reacted. She shrugged, completely casual, and said, "I sleep fine, so I don't really see the problem." That sentence landed like a slap. No apology, no concern, no acknowledgement of what I was going through. Just dismissal, as if my exhaustion didn't matter. As if my health was irrelevant because it wasn't affecting her directly. I tried again. I explained my schedule, long days, late nights, early mornings. I explained that lack of sleep affects performance, safety, and mental health. She brushed it off like I was complaining about background noise. That was the moment something inside me cracked, because on a cruise ship, sleep isn't comfort. It's survival, and she had decided that my survival was inconvenient. The breaking point came after one of the longest workdays I've ever had. I woke up at 9 a.m., rehearsed, performed, smiled, entertained, worked nonstop until 11 p.m. My body ached. My head throbbed. All I wanted was rest. I had to be up again at 6 a.m. that night. Her snoring allowed me exactly 2 hours of sleep. 2 hours. As I lay there, staring into the darkness, listening to her breathe like a broken machine. Exhaustion turned into clarity. Frustration hardened into resolve. And for the first time since this started, I stopped asking myself how to endure it. I started asking myself how to make her understand. The worst part about extreme exhaustion isn't just the tiredness, it's the way it rewires your thoughts. After weeks of broken sleep, my body stopped trusting rest. Even during the rare quiet moments, my brain stayed alert, waiting for the next choking gasp to rip me awake. I wasn't sleeping anymore. I was collapsing for short periods and jolting back into consciousness like my body was under attack. Mornings became cruel. I'd wake up already drained, my head pounding before my feet even hit the floor. My eyes felt gritty, like sand was stuck behind them. Coffee stopped working. Energy drinks just made my hands shake. I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize myself. Dark circles carved deep under my eyes, skin dull, expression flat. And every morning, as I climbed down from my bunk, I'd see her stretching calmly, well-rested, completely unaffected. That contrast ate at me. She'd yawn casually and say things like, "Wow, I slept so good," or complain about being tired in the most unserious way possible. Every time she said it, something twisted in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how she dared to talk about being tired when she was the reason I was barely functioning. But I swallowed it, because on a ship, conflict follows you everywhere. There is no space to escape it. During work, I started making small mistakes, missed cues, slower reactions. I'd catch myself zoning out during rehearsals, my mind replaying the sounds from the night before, the choking, the rattling, the sudden silence followed by another violent breath. It was like my brain had memorized her snoring and refused to let it go. I tried everything I could think of. I adjusted my sleep schedule. I tried napping during breaks. I layered earplugs under headphones. I even slept sitting up one night, hunched awkwardly against the wall like that might help. Nothing did. Sound on a ship doesn't just travel. It hunts you. Every night followed the same pattern. She'd climb into her bunk, scroll on her phone, lights dim, and within minutes it would start. That first broken inhale, the pause, then the explosion of sound. And every night, my body reacted the same way, muscles tensing, heart racing, mind screaming that something was wrong. What made it worse was knowing it didn't have to be this way. There were options: nasal strips, sleep studies, position changes, white noise compromises. Even acknowledgement would have helped, but she refused all of it. Not because she couldn't help it, but because she didn't want to. That realization shifted something inside me. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't ignorance. This was a choice. She had chosen her comfort over my well-being. And she felt justified because she was the one sleeping fine. My exhaustion was invisible to her because it didn't inconvenience her. And once I understood that, sympathy disappeared. All that was left was resentment. I stopped trying to sleep early. I'd lie there, eyes open, staring into the darkness, listening to her breathe like a malfunctioning machine, counting the minutes until my alarm. Sometimes I'd look at the clock and do the math in my head. If I fell asleep right now, I'd get 3 hours, 2 hours, 90 minutes. Watching rest slip away in real time does something cruel to your mind. I started noticing how quiet she was during the day about my struggle. She never asked how I slept, never checked in, never acknowledged the conversation we'd already had. It was like she'd decided the problem didn't exist anymore simply because she didn't want to deal with it, and that hurt more than the noise. One afternoon, during a rare break, I went back to the cabin hoping she wouldn't be there. I just wanted silence, darkness, a moment to breathe. But she was there, lying on her bunk, scrolling through her phone, relaxed. When she noticed me, she casually said she was planning to take a nap. A nap. The word echoed in my head. I felt something snap, subtle but permanent. My hands clenched before I even realized it. A nap was a luxury I hadn't had in weeks. And she was about to take one without a single thought about what she'd taken from me night after night. I nodded and said nothing, but inside, my thoughts were spiraling. Images of sleepless nights stacked on top of each other. My body remembered every one of them. The panic, the frustration, the helplessness. And suddenly, an idea formed, quiet at first, almost innocent. She didn't believe me. That was the problem. She didn't believe the snoring was that bad because she'd never had to hear it. She only knew her own version of reality, where she slept peacefully and woke up refreshed. Words hadn't worked. Explanations hadn't worked, reason hadn't worked. So maybe sound would. The thought lingered longer than it should have. At first, I tried to dismiss it. It felt petty, immature. But the longer I stood there, listening to her settle in comfortably, the more justified it felt. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about making her experience the reality she'd forced me to live in. That night, after another brutal stretch of broken sleep, I didn't just lie there staring at the ceiling. I listened carefully. I paid attention. For the first time, instead of reacting emotionally, I observed. I memorized the rhythm, the pauses, the way the sound filled the cabin. And quietly, without waking her, I reached for my phone. As I pressed record, my hands were steady. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just anger anymore. This was the beginning. Of something she wouldn't be able to ignore. Once the idea settled into my mind, it didn't feel impulsive anymore. It felt inevitable. Exhaustion has a way of sharpening your thoughts, stripping away hesitation until only clarity remains. That night, as I lay awake listening to her breathing tear through the cabin, I wasn't angry in the way people imagine anger. I was calm, focused, observant. Every choking gasp, every rattling inhale, every violent exhale felt like evidence, proof. I wasn't exaggerating. I wasn't sensitive. I wasn't imagining things. This was real, and I was done being the only one forced to live with it. I held my phone close to my chest, the glow of the screen dimmed, my finger hovering over the record button. For a brief moment, I hesitated, not because I thought it was wrong, but because I knew once I did this, there was no going back. This wasn't a conversation anymore. This was escalation. And as another explosive snore ripped through the cabin, shaking the thin walls, my hesitation disappeared. I pressed record. The sound was even worse through the microphone. Raw, unfiltered, it picked up everything. The wet choking, the harsh pauses. The way it sounded like her airway was collapsing over and over again. Listening through my headphones, I felt a sick twist in my stomach, not guilt validation. This was what I'd been hearing night after night while she slept peacefully. This was the reality she'd dismissed with a shrug. I recorded for longer than I needed to. Minutes passed, then more. I wanted there to be no denying it, no room for excuses. When I finally stopped the recording, I didn't feel relief. I felt resolve. This wasn't about embarrassing her. It wasn't about humiliating her. It was about forcing her to experience the thing she'd refused to acknowledge. The next day dragged. Work felt heavier than usual, not just physically but mentally. My body was running on fumes, but my mind was sharp, almost buzzing. I kept thinking about the recording. About the moment I'd play it. About the look on her face when reality finally broke through her indifference. I wasn't excited. I was steady. Like someone waiting for a storm they knew was coming. When my break finally came, I headed back to the cabin. The hallway felt longer than usual. Every step echoed with anticipation. As I opened the door, there she was, sitting on her bunk, relaxed, scrolling on her phone. She looked up at me and casually said she was going to take a nap. Nap. The word landed like an insult. I nodded, my face neutral, my voice calm. Okay. I sat down on my bunk and waited as she settled in, turning onto her side, completely at ease. Within moments, her breathing slowed. The cabin grew quiet in that fragile way it does right before everything breaks. I picked up my phone. I didn't announce what I was doing. I didn't warn her. I just pressed play. The sound filled the room instantly. Her snoring, amplified, violent, unmistakable. She shot upright like she'd been electrocuted. Her eyes flew open, wild and confused, her head snapping toward me as if she couldn't process what she was hearing. For a second, she just stared, frozen, listening to her own choking gasps bounce off the walls. "What the hell is that?" she demanded. I met her gaze and said nothing. Her confusion shifted into realization, and then into shock. Is that me?" she asked, her voice suddenly tight. I nodded slowly. "That's you. That's what I hear every single night." Her face flushed instantly, embarrassment mixed with anger. Like she didn't know which emotion to grab onto first. "Turn that off," she snapped. I didn't move. Instead, I said the words that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. "You told me it wasn't a big deal. You said you sleep fine. So if it's not a problem, why should I turn it off?" The silence that followed was heavy. The recording kept playing, each choking sound louder than the last. Her jaw clenched, her hands balled into fists. She looked furious, but underneath that anger was something else. Discomfort, awareness. The reality she'd refused to face was now unavoidable. She exploded. She hurled a few choice words at me. Accused me of being crazy, dramatic, petty. She said I was trying to embarrass her on purpose, but none of that mattered, because for the first time since this started, she wasn't relaxed. She wasn't comfortable. She wasn't dismissive. She was affected. She stormed out of the cabin, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. The silence that followed felt unreal. I sat there, the recording still playing softly, and for the first time in weeks my chest felt lighter, not because the problem was solved, but because the power imbalance had shifted, and I didn't stop there. For the next 3 days, every time she tried to rest, I played it. Every nap, every attempt to sleep, I didn't raise the volume excessively, I didn't add anything extra. I simply gave her exactly what she'd given me. Her own reality reflected back at her. Each time, her reactions were the same: shock, anger, frustration. She started avoiding the cabin, staying out longer, sleeping elsewhere when she could. And every time she shot me a glare, I felt something close to justice. Not joy, not cruelty. Balance. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore, and that's when she decided to go over my head. For 3 days, the balance of power had shifted. And she hated every second of it. The same person who used to crawl into her bunk without a care in the world was now tense, guarded, and visibly irritated. She started timing her movements, checking whether I was in the cabin before entering, hesitating at the door like someone walking into enemy territory. And every time she thought she'd finally get rest, the sound of her own breathing followed. Not exaggerated, not edited, just raw truth. Watching her struggle with that reality didn't make me feel cruel, it made me feel seen. For once, my suffering wasn't invisible. But people like her don't reflect inward for long. Accountability is uncomfortable, and she had never shown any interest in discomfort, instead of addressing the actual problem. She chose the path I should have expected from the beginning. She went straight to management. Not with the full story, of course. Not with context. She painted herself as the victim and me as the aggressor. According to her version, I was playing loud, disturbing noises for no reason. I was harassing her. I was creating a hostile environment. And just like that, the narrative flipped. 1. I got the message asking me to come in for a meeting. My stomach dropped, not because I thought I was wrong, but because I knew how these things usually go. Authority tends to favor the person who complains first, especially when the complaint sounds clean and simple. I replayed every moment in my head as I walked to the office, the metal floors cold beneath my feet. I wondered if this was where it would backfire, if I'd finally pushed too far. If exhaustion had clouded my judgment more than I realized. The office was small and sterile, the kind of place designed to drain emotion out of the air. My manager sat across from me with that neutral expression people wear when they're about to decide something that affects your daily life. She was already there, sitting stiffly, arms crossed. Eyes fixed on the wall like she didn't even want to look at me. The moment I sat down, I could feel the tension crackle between us. She spoke first. Her voice was controlled, but there was an edge to it, sharpened by anger and wounded pride. She said I was being immature, that I was intentionally disrupting her rest, that I was playing disturbing sounds to get back at her. She made it sound random, malicious, unprovoked, conveniently. She left out weeks of sleep deprivation. She left out the conversation where she dismissed me. She left out the choking snoring that had driven me to this point. I listened quietly, hands folded in my lap, heart pounding but steady. When she finished, the room fell silent. My manager turned to me and asked for my side. And this was the moment everything changed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I didn't sound defensive. I explained everything from the beginning. The cruise ship environment, the docking noise, the thin walls, the fact that I was on the top bunk. I described the snoring in detail, including the choking sounds that made me think she was having medical emergencies. I explained how I'd tried earplugs, headphones, music, schedule changes. I explained the conversation we'd had, and the exact words she'd said to me. I sleep fine, so I don't see the problem. Then I told my manager why I recorded her. I said, calmly and clearly, that words hadn't worked, that empathy hadn't worked, that the only thing left was to let her hear what I was hearing. Not to embarrass her, but to make the problem real. And then, because I knew talk alone might not be enough, I offered proof. I played the recording. The room changed instantly. The sound was undeniable, harsh, violent, concerning. Even my manager's expression shifted as the choking gasps echoed through the office. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look away. When the recording ended, the silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. My manager leaned back in her chair and looked at my roommate. "Have you talked to medical about this?" she asked. "Because this doesn't sound healthy, and you can't just dismiss your roommate's need for sleep." My roommate's face went red, not with anger this time, but with embarrassment and frustration. She tried to argue, tried to minimize it, said it wasn't that bad. But the evidence had already spoken louder than she ever could. The verdict wasn't what she'd expected. The manager didn't fully take her side. In fact, she told her directly that she was being difficult by refusing to address the issue and brushing off my exhaustion. She acknowledged that while my response was unconventional, it came from prolonged sleep deprivation and lack of cooperation. That's when my roommate snapped. The meeting ended with a compromise neither of us had predicted. We were reassigned to different roommates, separate cabins, separate lives. As we walked out, she shot me a look full of pure resentment. She was angry that she hadn't won. Angry that her version of events hadn't stuck. Angry that, for once, she'd been forced to confront herself. But for me, something else settled in. Relief. Not triumph. Not pride. Just the quiet relief of knowing that for once, telling the truth and backing it up had been enough. The first night in my new cabin should have felt like relief. But instead it felt unreal. I lay there staring at the ceiling, heart beating slow but alert, like my body didn't trust the silence yet. No choking sounds, no violent snoring shaking the metal walls, no sudden gasps that made my chest tighten. Just the low, distant hum of the ship cutting through water. I realized something then that hit harder than I expected. I had forgotten what peace sounded like. Real peace. The kind where your body finally unclenches without asking permission. And that's when it sank in. This whole thing was never just about snoring. It was about being dismissed, about being told my exhaustion didn't matter because it wasn't convenient for someone else. Over the next few days, word spread the way it always does on a ship, quietly, side glances in hallways, a few raised eyebrows in the mess. People didn't ask me directly, but I could feel it, the curiosity, the unspoken. Was it really that bad? And every time I heard someone mention her name, there was a pause afterward, like they were waiting for confirmation. I never trash-talked her. I didn't need to. The truth had already done the damage. She'd gone from harmless loud sleeper to the one who refused to fix a problem and then cried foul when someone pushed back. Reputation doesn't sink fast, but once it cracks, it never fully repairs. She, on the other hand, changed. Not in a dramatic, apologetic way, more subtle, more bitter. She stopped making eye contact when we passed each other. Her shoulders were always tense, jaw tight. Like she was chewing on anger she couldn't spit out. Once, I heard her telling someone that I took it too far, that I embarrassed her on purpose. I almost laughed, because what she really meant was that for the first time, she had been forced to hear herself. Literally. And she didn't like what it sounded like. That's the thing about accountability, it feels like an attack when you've never had to face it before. What stuck with me most wasn't her anger, though. It was the manager's words during that meeting, replaying in my head at random moments. Sleep deprivation is a safety issue, not a comfort issue, not a preference, a safety issue. Hearing that out loud felt validating in a way I didn't know I needed. I wasn't weak. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't petty. I was exhausted, ignored, and pushed until I snapped, and when I finally pushed back, suddenly I was the problem. That realization hardened something in me, a quiet promise that I wouldn't make myself smaller just to keep someone else comfortable ever again. A week later, someone from another department thanked me. Actually thanked me. She said my old roommate had finally booked a medical consult. Sleep apnea. Severe. The choking sounds weren't just annoying, they were dangerous. That information landed heavy. For a split second, guilt flickered. Then, it passed, because I had tried. I had spoken calmly. I had asked for compromise. I had been ignored. Sometimes people don't move until discomfort is unavoidable. If my revenge forced her to confront something she'd been avoiding for years, then so be it. Growth doesn't always come wrapped in kindness. Now, before we go any further, if you're still listening and this story is hitting a nerve, do me a favor, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Seriously, city, country, wherever you are right now. I read those, and they matter more than you think. And trust me, this story isn't just about a cruise ship or a roommate. It's about something way more universal. Because here's the truth no one likes to say out loud: most people don't change because they're asked nicely. They change because the consequences finally outweigh their comfort. I didn't set out to humiliate her. I set out to survive. And when survival required me to reflect her behavior back at her, unfiltered and unavoidable, that reflection became the mirror she'd been dodging. The irony still makes my head shake. She slept through my suffering for months, but couldn't handle hearing 10 seconds of herself. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about it late at night, about how close she came to just saying, "Okay, let's figure something out." One sentence, 1 ounce of empathy, and none of this would have happened. That's the quiet tragedy of it, not the recording, not the meeting, not the move. The tragedy is how easy it would have been to avoid. If she had just cared a little more about someone other than herself. So what's the lesson here? It's not get revenge. It's not fight fire with fire. It's this: your needs are valid, even when they inconvenience someone else, especially then. And if someone keeps dismissing your exhaustion, your pain, your boundaries, eventually, they're teaching you how they expect to be treated. You can accept that lesson, or you can rewrite it. I rewrote mine, and for the first time in months, I slept, really slept. No guilt, no anger, just silence. And sometimes, silence is the loudest victory of all. If this story made you feel something: anger, relief, satisfaction, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, subscribe for more real, emotionally charged stories like this. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in my place? And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from, because no matter where you are in the world, we've all had that moment where we were pushed too far, and finally decided to push back.